All praises and thanks are due to Allah. May his peace and blessings be upon the Prophet Muhammad, his family, his companions, and all of those who follow the path of righteousness until the last day. Ameen. This podcast is personal. My team and I are not representing any movement, organization, or political voice. These stories come from my own life. Greetings of peace, everybody. In my first episode, I opened a small window for you into Northwest DC, the neighborhoods I grew up in. I touched on how the news media, movements, organizations, and religious voices came through our neighborhoods, shaping my thoughts. I won't speak for anybody else. I also talked a little bit about being in the midst of racism, segregation, and uncertainty. I wanted you to have that glimpse as an overall rhythm of the streets. I touched on the trauma I lived through. I did not do that for your sympathy, but I wanted to show you how pain can teach you how to survive. And after all of the life that I lived, I can truly relate to our reminder, and I hope that you had a chance to ponder on it also. Let me repeat it for you. Quote, quit worrying about your past. Things happen for a reason. God never wastes a moment of what you have experienced. What you went through before can be the catalyst for change that is needed for tomorrow. From that reminder, I learned that sometimes I personally do need to let things go and turn the page to see what the next day, the next year, or in my case, decades will bring. Life could be easier if I would have had some instructions, because when the day is done, I cannot bring it back. And I personally waste a lot of time worrying about things that happened in my past. Please, if you like, share in the comments what that reminder meant to you, and if you might use it in your life as an instruction to help you make better life choices. And remember that there's no compulsion in this space of ours. Thank you for that. So now that we've looked back, let's keep moving forward. You're about to hear the next part of my story, and this portion will be shared in audio only. So pull up your chair, sit back, relax, and enjoy. I was born Jacqueline Davis, 1948, to a young high school educated mother who had a son, my older brother Milton, 2 years before I was born. My mother did eventually graduate from Paul Laurence Dunbar High School in Northwest DC. As I grew older, I saw pictures of her when she was in her late teens, and her early 20s. She was a nice looking woman, fair complexion, about 5'4". I would say she weighed about 125 pounds. She was like any other teenager. She had friends that perhaps her parents did not approve of. She did things that they probably did not approve of. But what can you say? I learned later in life from conversations that my mom was her dad's favorite, and her brother, my uncle, was my grandmother's favorite. I won't say that it gave either of them free passes to do as they pleased, but such is life. Thank God that she had those supporting parents and was able to live with them, and the only sibling that she had, a brother, my Uncle Freddie. He was very handsome. He looked like his dad. He was about 6'2", medium brown complexion. He was in the Army at the time of my birth, and he would come home on furloughs from his service. I was close to 2 years of age when he started coming home. Later in my life, he would talk about how I would always find my way into his room and pull his records and books down from his bookcase. Now, let me say this. The way I'm going to tell my stories when others are involved will be very decent, not judgmental, not slandering, nor degrading. Not that I have any nasty things to say about people, but when it comes to my mom, there are some things that she did in life that I didn't like, but I'm not going to talk about my mother in degrading manners. It's just that her life was her life, and I don't have the right to slander her, especially since she is deceased. Just like everybody else, my mother had problems. I don't know what the origins of her problems were or when her problems started. She had her first child, my brother, at the age of 14, and 2 years later, she had me. She passed away at the age of 36, leaving to grieve 9 children. God gives us life and He takes it away. I say this with truth, but not in a degrading manner, because I promised that I would not degrade, backbite, or gossip about my mom or anybody else in these podcast episodes. I was born in the Gallinger Municipal Hospital in Southeast D.C. It no longer exists. For those of you who know D.C., my first home was at 209 O Street Northwest. I'm learning that that is also gone. Of course, I can't say that I remember much of anything as a child, but as I was told, we all, my grandmother, my grandfather, my uncle, my mother, my brother, and myself, we moved to a big house on South Carolina Avenue in Southeast Washington, D.C., when I was about 2 years old. My grandparents were from Richmond, Virginia, and they moved to D.C. before either of their 2 children were born. My grandfather, George Davis, was a chef cook. He was a very handsome man with a medium brown skin complexion. Granddaddy was about 6 feet tall and very thin in weight. He had a quiet, soft-spoken personality. He was a churchgoer, and whenever he would drink alcoholic beverages, he would only do so sociably. And he did not smoke cigarettes. Of course, I'm a toddler, and I only know these stories because they were told to me later on in my life. Granddaddy loved me and my brother dearly and used to give us a great deal of attention and affection. He would proudly take us for walks around the neighborhood. We would go grocery shopping with him, and wherever else he went to leisurely. I heard that he was really proud of his 2 grandkids and wanted to show us off in the community. And I also heard that we actually had a piano in our home, and that my grandfather played the piano. And from what I learned is that we, my brother and I, would sit on his lap and he would sing to us and play piano songs for us. I was told that he loved and respected his wife, my grandmother. Her name was Estelle. He loved her very much. Granny was what we called her, was a proud wife, a good mother to her 2 children to the best of her ability. And she became the best grandmother there is to my brother and me. Again, of course, I don't know this stuff firsthand. Remember, I'm a toddler. But she lived to be about 86. So I did have a great deal of time to get to know her. and love her and hear all of these stories firsthand from her. And so did my uncle live until I was about 44. And I learned that I was his favorite niece, in spite of the 4 children that he had of his own. Granny was, of course, a beautiful woman, frail weight, lightish brown skin tone, about 5'3", with a soft, comforting personality, and she always kept a pleasant, stern facial expression. Granny, she was our mother figure. She kept the household intact, as a mother usually does. She made sure that my brother and I were well groomed. We ate our breakfasts, lunches, and dinners sitting at the table. We were taught things that parents usually teach their children, and also things that would probably be necessary to know later in our lives. Whether or not we used these teachings, they were embedded in our memory banks. For instance, as I grew under the eyes of my granny, say around 4-ish, Granny used to tell me to say, "If I live and nothing happens." She taught that whenever I made any plans for the future, that I should always say, "If I live and nothing happens." And she would actually catch me making plans as a child. And if I did not add that, she would call my attention to that. And finally, I learned that that was something that I needed to keep in my memory bank, because my grandmother insisted that I learn it and do it. And after I was able to process that suffix, I always said, "I am going to do such and such if I live and nothing happens." And I lived my life as such. And I'm now 77 now, and I say, "If God wills." And that's what that meant. My granny kept us up to date with our shots and medical checkups, dental health, naps, baths, playtime, vitamins, etc. She was our mother. Thank God for that. And even still today, when young girls have children, their parents usually always step in to be the backbone. I was getting old enough to understand things and remember things. By the time I was 4, we moved from Southeast to 909 Columbia Road Northwest. The house was smaller, but big enough for our small family. Now, I am getting ready to start school, and back in the day, I don't remember kindergarten. I remember going straight into the first grade at 5, and this was in 1953. And most likely I would be graduating from high school at the age of 17 in 1965, if I lived and nothing happened. My first school was Monroe Elementary School. Later in my adult life, Monroe merged with Bruce Elementary. Now it is called Bruce Monroe Elementary School. It was about 2 blocks away from my new home. But when we moved to Northwest, it was summertime, and we still had time to get used to our new neighbors, the neighborhood, the stores and places of business, and meeting new friends and roaming around the streets. There were lots of children on that street. Around the corner, in the next block, everywhere, there were children, some the same age, some younger, some older, whites and blacks. And back in the day, as little kids, roaming the neighborhood was safe and a lot of fun. We would walk around a city block and not have any fears. No one would be wondering where you were. It was protocol that when the street lights came on, which was sunset, you would have to go into your house to check in. And maybe you could go back out, but it had to be stay in front of your house and not off on another street. As long as if someone called your name, you could hear them and answer. And back in the day, most all of the streets had alleys. That is where the trash and the garbage was kept and picked up by the trash and garbage trucks. Life was good in Northwest because the streets were livelier. Lots and lots of kids in the neighborhoods, stores on the corners, schools with playgrounds nearby, movie theaters nearby, shopping centers nearby or walking distance, swimming pools, parks, roller skating rinks. And we did not ride to any place. We didn't ride, we walked. Everywhere we needed to go to, we walked. And sometimes within a 2-mile range. And a city block in Washington, D.C. refers to the area bound by 4 streets or avenues. That was life back in the day. And on the 4th of July, everybody in the neighborhoods would go to the Cardozo High School to watch the fireworks presented from the monument. An excellent view, and everybody had a clear view of the fireworks. A child's punishment back in the day was to prevent them from going outside. That was a serious punishment. That was torture. Now, let me clarify this though, because if someone is listening to this and they grew up in Northeast, Southeast, or Southwest, they would claim that their neighborhoods were better, and I cannot dispute that. So remember, I'm talking from the experience that I had in Northwest. So please pardon me for bragging so much about Northwest, but that's where I grew up. For the remainder of that summer, I became familiar with my new home, my new nearby neighbors, and distant neighborhoods. I had met a lot of friends my age, some older, and I could not wait for school to start so that I could meet more friends and have more fun during the day. And as we would wander out of our neighborhoods and maybe pick apples from other people's trees, peaches, grapes from grapevines in other people's yards, we would get yelled at. This is page 4. Okay. Sometimes we were called dirty names, but that did not stop us from going back and picking people's apples and peaches and grapes. We were kids. What did we know? But I did not like being called dirty and black and ugly. So I would go home and try to wash my hands and face to see if I could get to a lighter color. But it did not work. And these comments would continue. But I'm a baby, so it did not hurt me that much then. But I did need to find out why I was black and find out why I could not wash the black away. Soap usually gets everything clean. But it didn't wash away the black. So school started in September. The hours for school in those days were from 9 a.m. until 3 p.m. Lunch was at 12, but milk and cookies were served every day at about 11 a.m. Our teachers would take the orders the day before so that we could have the amounts of money that we needed to purchase our snacks. Oatmeal cookies and a half pint of milk costed 3 pennies. 1 penny for a cookie and 2 pennies for the milk. Now, you could buy as many cookies as you liked, but 1 or 2 was always enough. And those cookies were baked daily at the Wonder Bread Bakery near the Howard University on Georgia Avenue Northwest, about a half a block from our school. And every day a fresh box of cookies would arrive, and the smell was awesome. And the milkman would bring the cold cartons of milk with straws, and that, my dear friends, was one of the highlights of my school days. I turned 6 a few months after school started. Now, I have no memories of all of the teachers' names, friends' names, and such, but I have a lot of memories of events. One thing I remember, that I loved school with a passion, and I would cry my heart out if I had to miss a day. I learned how to read books in school. I learned how to spell words. I learned how to write sentences. I learned how to do arithmetic. We called the subjects reading, writing, and arithmetic in those days. I learned how to interact with the other students and our teachers. I learned a great deal of discipline. And listen, in those days, if you wanted to speak or ask a question in school, you had to raise your hand and wait to be called on by the teacher. If you needed to go to the restroom, you had to raise your hand and ask for permission. The teacher were called Mr. or Miss or Mrs. For instance, Miss Smith or Mrs. Smith. Never say hey or you. We were not allowed to speak out of turn. When we were testing and doing classwork, we were obedient. Every now and then, we as kids would get rowdy, but it was very easy to get us back in order. If you were absent from school and did not notify the school, say 2 days, a truant officer would come to your house and find out why you were not in school. If a school-aged child was caught roaming the streets during school hours, they would probably be taken to the juvenile detention center. Their parents would be contacted, and so on and so forth. There were students that did not like school and played hooky. Hooky means pretending to go to school but not going, just hanging out in other people's houses or in other people's neighborhoods, like in Northeast and Southwest or whatever. Those were the ones that would be taken to a detention center. My brother Milton was one of those that did not like school, and as he got older, he dropped out and started to do other things that he wanted to do. Again, in those days, if you were disobedient, you would probably have to stay after school, and your parents would be called, and that meant that in addition to having to stay after school, you would probably get a spanking and or be punished. And that meant no outside. Oh no. So we mostly stayed on our best behavior. Teachers were allowed to discipline too. Parents would give them permission, not beatings and hitting, but maybe a tap or sit down in your seat or stand in the corner. And if that happened, you would get the extras at home. No outside. So that year passed. I succeeded and made it to the 2nd grade. I was really, truly in love with school by then. One day on the playground, a classmate was sharing 6 and 7-year-old stories, advice, and fairy tales. So the student said, if something bothers you and you get scared of it, you can just put your hand on your heart and God will make it go away. So what do we know? We are babies. But we are learning how to socialize and communicate and exercise what we learn in our classrooms. So that bit of knowledge was put in my mind, but would I ever need it? Who knows? But listen, you all, you might just hear this again in the upcoming podcast. So remember it. If I live and nothing happened. So tragedy. Tragedy. One day, I came home from school and I learned that my granddaddy had died. Oh no. How could that happen? What happened to him? What would we do now? My little mind was in shambles. He was not coming back anymore. No one to love us. No one to cook for us. No one to work and bring money home. No one to make my granny laugh and keep her happy. I did not understand this then. My grandmother, she had no employable skills. And my mother was still in her early 20s. It was time for me to talk to God about this black skin that He gave me. In the midst of all of this, I went up to the second floor of our home and I looked up to the ceiling and I said, God, do you love me? And I heard, yes, I love you. But I wanted to know why I was black, but no response to that question. I was not disappointed. I wanted to know what would happen to our family. And by then, I had 2 more brothers. After it was all said and done, my mother got into a relationship with my brother's father. But that was not accepted by me. Why didn't I have a father? Where was he? Who was he? And now that my granddaddy is not coming back again, who will love me and take care of us? My grandmother got things in order and relied on the father of my brothers. That lasted a while, but that did not last long enough to help us. My mother was really heartbroken, and so were we all. Even the neighbors and other family members, teachers, etc., about my grandfather. And back in the day, everybody got involved. It takes a village. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Columbia Road was like a village. And as our family got bigger, our house got smaller. I don't remember much about how things played out, but my grandmother decided that she needed to get a job so that she could support her grandchildren. All she was capable of was maid services, nanny jobs, and such. We're going to continue this story of my upbringing in the next episode, if God wills. And this, my dear listeners, is just the beginning of my journey from DC to Deen. Thank you all for your visit. Thank you for your subscribing. And thank you for your thumbs up. Now here's our reminder for the upcoming week. No matter what you are going through in life, always have faith in God. Trust that He wants the best for you. Even if He doesn't give you exactly what you want, He is always taking care of your needs. You might not see it right away, but eventually it will all make sense. And until next Thursday, if God wills, peace.